Hello once again, everybody. This is Teddy Wilson with Seekers of Yahweh Ministries. Shabbat Shalom. This week is week 28 in our Torah cycle, and we're going to be reading out of the 12th chapter of Leviticus. So everybody please grab your scriptures, pen and paper, and get ready to do a study of Yahweh's Word. Also, we're going to be looking at a word this week that we will trace from the Hebrew all the way back to the roots where it was first used in the Torah, and that word is conception. Also conceived, you'll see it many times in the English versions of your scriptures. And also this week we will learn how the portions are directly connected to Yahshua. And once again we'll be tracing the history of the word conceived, so that we can better understand Yahweh's plan for us as His people. Hallelujah. Before we get started, we'll go ahead and pray in. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you for the blood that was shed. We thank you for your Son, Yahshua. And as we begin to study your word, Father, we ask that you would lead us and guide us into all truth. And we thank you so very much for your presence with us today. And we pray this in the precious name of Yahshua. Hallelujah. All right, so this is our portion readings for the week are going to be, once again, Leviticus chapter 12. We're going to read the whole chapter there. And in doing so, we're going to see some very significant things concerning Yahshua and Yahweh's teaching on the concept behind to be conceived and the conception of life. Or if this Torah law is indeed pointing to a time in Messiah Yahshua, where is its origin? Remember, whenever we study Yahweh's Word, we don't want to start in the back of the book. We want to start in the front of the book so that by the time we get to the New Testament, we can understand what they were talking about. And we'll be conducting a word study on verse 2 on that word conceived. All right, so if everybody's got your scriptures open, we'll go ahead and get started reading the Torah portion, chapter 12 in Leviticus. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel, saying, when a woman has conceived," there's our word, "and has given birth to a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. And in the days of her monthly separation she is unclean. And on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin is circumcised." And once again, we need to remember that this is a picture of what would come in the Messiah. And what happens when a male child is circumcised, the head is exposed. So in this circumcision that we're going to be reading about with Yahshua, the head of the body, the chief of Israel, was exposed to Yehuda, or in the land of Judea, at the time he was circumcised. Verse 4, "And she remains in the blood of her cleansing 33 days. She does not touch whatever is set apart, and she does not come into the set apart place until the days of her cleansing are completed. And if she gives birth to a female child, then she shall be unclean for 2 weeks, as in her monthly separation, and she remains in the blood of her cleansing for 66 days. Now, what we're seeing here in Scripture is that if indeed the tabernacle was erected, or the temple was present, that the woman could not take the child to be presented until, if it was a male child, 33 days after its birth. So that gives us a timeline of when Yahshua was presented to the priests to be presented to Yahweh in the New Testament. It was 33 days after the birth of Yahshua, he was presented, when he was taken by the mother and father of the child, to the priest. Verse 6, "And when the days of her cleansing are completed, for a son or for a daughter, she brings to the priest a lamb a year old, as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering. to the door of the tent of meeting, and she shall bring it before Yahweh, make atonement. Verse 7 again. And he, speaking of the priest, shall bring it before Yahweh and make atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the flow of her blood. Now remember, there's all kinds of corresponding verses that we can see here in the New Testament. Remember the woman with the issue of blood? She touched Yahshua's tzitzit, the hem of his garment, and was healed. Also, in the picture that we're going to be seeing in the New Testament, we see that the woman who had been unclean, bringing Yahshua, her cleansing period had been fulfilled. And at that time, she was presenting the Savior, the Redeemer of the world, to the priest. And at that time, it was presented to Yahweh, who had commanded deliverance upon his people, Yisrael. So these Torah portions are directly connected to the conception and the birth of Yahshua. Verse 8, and if she is not able to bring a lamb, in other words, if you're poor, if you don't have a male sheep, if you don't have these types of commanded offerings, then you are to bring this instead. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. One is a burnt offering and the other is a sin offering. And the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Hallelujah. So many of you that are learning the scriptures already, probably the story of Yahshua being brought by his mother and Yosef to the priest at the temple, all kinds of scriptures there should be starting to come to light when we read what we see here in the Torah, because it was a command. And in the commandments, all of these commandments, we should be able to see a picture of Yahshua. And this is one of those instances where it is a very clear picture. Okay? Now once we get into the study of the word conceived, the ancient hieroglyphics of Yahweh's language are going to begin to show us some very significant things. We'll start out by going over this English word conceived in the Strong's Concordance. It's the Strong's Hebrew number 2232, and it's a Hebrew word sarah in Hebrew. And it means to sow. Now remember, this is the word conceived. And it means to sow, disseminate, plant, or fructify. Now, many of you, probably just as myself, may not know the definitions behind a couple of these words, so I took the liberty to look them up and put them here. Disseminate means to spread abroad as if sowing seed. Now the definition of that word is going to be significant as we get into this study, and the word fructify as well. Fructify means to make something fruitful or productive. Now, if something is having to be made productive, that means at one time it was producing something, and all of a sudden it stopped producing what Yahweh wanted it to produce. So Yahweh had to do some engrafting, Yahweh had to do some trimming, and to get the seed that he had sown in the earth to produce what he wanted it to produce. Alright? Once we get into these Hebrew letters in the ancient hieroglyphics, it's going to paint an even clearer picture of that. So here we see the word conceived in ancient Hebrew hieroglyphics, or the pictograph. Alright? Now, many of you, come to me, many of you have these sheets. Now, get them out because you're going to follow me along here. And first we're going to read the definitions of this word in the ancient Hebrew lexicon. and then we're going to go over the letters. All right? And it's made up of the Zion, the Resh, and the Ayin. All right? And concretely, it means to sow. So here we see conceived or conception has to do with something that is sowed, sowing, to spread seeds on the ground. Now remember, where did Adam come from? Adam was taken from the earth. All right? And the Ancient Hebrew Lexicon has this to say further about that word. Its action root is to sow. Concretely, it means seed. So here we see that in Hebrew, the concept of being conceived or conception has to do with sowing seed. Now immediately, all of these New Testament verses that we've been taught begin to come to light. The parable of the sower, Yahshua speaking and telling everyone that unless a seed die and go into the earth, it cannot grow and produce fruit. Many different verses in the New Testament do we see these concepts of sowing seed. And it's all got to do with the conception, the sowing and of the seed of His creation. So now we're going to be taking a look at the meaning of these letters. So if you have your sheets there, about a quarter of the way down, you're going to see this Zion. And you'll notice that its picture is a mattock or a plow even. Remember, when you see the pictures and the meanings, these definitions are not conclusive. I mean, there is more things that it can mean, and I'll point some of those things out today. Also, looking at the Zion, we see that it is a mattock. It's a sharp tool, or a plow, or a shovel, and it has to do with food, cutting, or nourish. It also has to do with a knife. And a knife, this letter, depending on the context of how it was being used in the ancient hieroglyphics, could even have something to do with circumcision, keeping vows, and being in covenant with Yahweh. And we see that significance here. The seed that was sown must be in covenant with Yahweh. This thing is used to till the ground. It's used to do many different things in the Hebrew. And there we see the Resh. The Resh, there you see down towards the bottom of your page, is the head of man. And of course, the head of man is Yahshua. Then if you go over and look at the meaning there, it can mean to be first, or the top, or beginning. And there's our clue. He's trying to tell us something, that there was something sown. There was a seed sown in the beginning by the head of all creation. Hallelujah. And the ayin, of course, is an eye. And you can look about 3/4 of the way down your page there, and you'll see that is the picture of an eye. And it means to watch, to know, to understand, to even be shaded by. And it can also mean that he's looking upon something, he's inspecting something. And I submit to you that he's inspecting that which he has sowed, the seed that he has sown on the earth within his creation. It's got something to do with that which was conceived in the garden, what he created. Alright, so by the words we see in the ancient Hebrew, we learn that this conception has something to do with sowing seed. Also, the letters have to do with plowing, tilling, cutting, or harvesting. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get into the harvest that is spoken about in Scripture. When he gathers his people into the barn, we are likened unto wheat and to fruit and all these agrobiological things that Yahweh's trying to show us by the seed that he planted on the earth. Remember that the Word also tells us that the people of Israel are Yahweh's inheritance. Why? Because they've been conceived. We must sojourn with Israel. We must be planted. We must have him sow the seed in us, which is the Word we're going to see. Alright? Once again, it has something to do with cutting or harvesting in order to be nourished. Look at your papers once again, and you'll see that the Zion has something to do with nourishment. Okay, so we are seeing plowing, tilling, cutting, or harvesting in order to be nourished by the Father. Very significant for us to understand those concepts before we get into the New Testament or Brit Hadashah. Alright. So we're going to be taking a look of the history of the conception. Remember, because one of the words there spoke about beginning. And I submit to you that's Yahweh trying to direct us back to the beginning so that we can understand his teaching about conception. To be conceived in the womb of the bride. Alright? So looking at the history of conception, here we will witness the first scattering of the seed and scriptural teaching on conception. That word that we were looking at directed us back to the beginning, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to be reading Genesis 3:13 through 16 and verses 23 through 24, and in between there we'll be taking a look at 1 Timothy 2, going to the New Testament to make these connections to the New Testament to show everybody that this is not two separate doctrines for two separate groups of people. It's one continuous story from cover to cover. Alright? So let's begin at Genesis chapter 3 and at verse 13. Alright. Genesis 3 beginning at 13, setting the stage. This is where everybody was in trouble. This is where Eve ate the fruit. It wasn't an apple, but anyway. Okay. She partook. She consumed the fruit. And she shared it with her husband, Adam. Everybody's in trouble. Yahweh gets everybody in a huddle here, and he starts laying down judgment. It's the first time we see Yahweh's teaching on conception, to be conceived. Right? Beginning at verse 13 in Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 3, and Yahweh Elohim said to the woman, "What is this that thou hast done?" And the woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Many of you in your English versions are seeing beguiled there, where I read deceived. It means to be morally seduced. He tricked her. He tricked her into believing his word over Yahweh's. Now, that seed that was planted was handed down to Adam's descendants from then on. Alright? You look in the world today, and you start reading out of the Old Testament, they call it, and you see how many people accept this word. A great majority of people are going to reject that and say it's for the Jews. That's the same exact spirit that Satan put into Eve then. We're choosing somebody else's word over Yahweh's word. It's the same spirit of deception. And until we're able to recognize that, we're always going to be deceived. There's only one way to come out of that deception. that was handed down in the garden, and that's to believe Yahweh's word over the lies. There's no other way. And the only way to do that is to understand Yahweh's conception, his teaching on how to be conceived by the woman. Now here we see that he's speaking to the woman, but he's addressing everybody. All right? Verse 14, and Yahweh Elohim said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than livestock, more than all livestock, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go and eat the dust, and eat dust all of thy days. Brothers and sisters, a quick question. What was Adam created out of? Dust. The adversary, by deception, is living off of us that were created out of the dust of the earth. And once again, until you understand this concept Yahweh presented about being conceived and the conception in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, then you're going to be underneath that spirit of deception until you come to realize how you are to be conceived. It's very important for us to understand. Okay, verse 15 says, and I put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. Okay. I don't know how many people went through sex education classes during your schooling, okay? But the woman does not produce seed. She produces an egg. This is very, very important for us to understand because there's a prophecy here. Yahweh was telling us something here. Woman doesn't produce a seed, but the seed that had been produced by the enemy, that has been sown, the tares that have been sown among the wheat, okay? He sowed a seed, and Yahweh said, I'm going to give the woman a seed. You see that? Because a woman doesn't produce a seed, the man produces seed. And he's going to put enmity between the seed that he had sown in the creation and the seed that Yahweh was going to give the woman. He's going to put an enmity there. He's going to separate the bad from the good, the wicked from the righteous, the sheep from the goats. All of these biblical concepts. All right. So he's going to put enmity between his seed and her seed. And he's talking about a seed here. He already starts addressing the seed as a he. That he is Yahshua. This is where Yahshua was first prophesied. By what? Conception. Watch this. He shall crush your head, and you shall crush his heel. Verse 16. And to the woman he said, see, he doesn't address her as Eve. He addresses woman. Each and every woman. And you, woman. To the woman he said, I greatly increase your sorrow and your conception. There's our word. It's the first time it's used in Scripture. Bring forth children in pain. Many of you are already seeing in sorrow. And your desires for your husband. And your husband does rule over you. What he just said was to woman, not to Eve. He's addressing the woman that would, every woman that would ever live on the face of this planet. And it was understood by the enemy about the seed because he already called the seed a he. And so that's why the adversary has been over after the male children that come out of the womb of a woman since that day forward. Because he knew that what Yahweh had actually told woman was, I'm going to come to you. And through you, I'm going to produce a seed, a ben in Hebrew. Okay, it takes on a title in the New Testament. Ben, son. ban in Hebrew. And ban in Hebrew is made up of the bet and the nun. The house and seed. The seed that would come from the house. Alright? Now, I've had some people in the past tell me, well, Teddy, that's a good concept, but can you prove that scripturally anywhere else that is what these scriptures are talking about, that this was a prophecy of the Messiah that would come through childbearing of the woman? And we can see this if we turn to 1 Timothy chapter 2. Shaul or Paul writes about this as well. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Paul or Shaul writes, "And Adam was not deceived, but the woman, having been deceived, fell into transgression. But she shall be saved through childbearing, if they continue in the belief and love, set apartness, which is holiness, and with sensibleness," if she's sober-minded. So yes, through the woman, through the conception and through the seed that she would produce, would come salvation, deliverance, for not only woman, but all men, women, and children that ever had been born or ever will be born. All right? So, getting back to the Hebraic expressions we're seeing here, the seed promised to the woman. And you can remember all of these times throughout Scripture that the male children of the Israelites were attacked, murdered, killed by the thousands. Nobody has a problem with that. Nobody has a problem with the Holocaust. Nobody has a problem with the attack on the male children of Israel. And we, if you are a male and you believe in Yahshua HaMashiach, then you too are under attack. It's still happening today. If he can remove the head of the household, he's got the household in subjection. And he's able to attack the woman with the head of the house out of the way. That's his game plan. Alright? So we're looking at the seed promised to the woman. Now we'll be going into the Brit Hadashah New Testament. We're going to be reading where all of this stuff starts to take place. We just read in the Torah the prophecy of it. And now we're going to be turning to Luke chapter 1 and reading verses 26 through 35. Now this is speaking about in the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, because Yahshua and John the Baptist, Yohanan the Immerser, were cousins, and they were about 6 months apart. In Luke chapter 1, beginning of verse 26, we read, "And in the 6th month, the messenger Gabriel was sent by Elohim to a city of Galilee named Nazareth, to a maiden engaged to a man whose name was Joseph, of the house of David, and the maiden's name was Miriam." Many of you in your versions or English translations are seeing Mary there. Verse 28, "And the messenger coming to her said, 'Greetings, favored one. The master is with you. Blessed are you among who? Women.'" Remember, he was just speaking to woman in the book of Genesis. And he was saying that he was going to give her a seed. right? Hallelujah. Verse 29, but she was greatly disturbed by this word and wondered what kind of greeting it was. And the messenger said to her, do not be afraid, Miriam, for you have found favor with Elohim. And see, you have, verse 31 says, and see, you shall conceive. There's our word. Woman conceiving. What's about to take place is the promised seed that would come is being granted to this one woman. And that's why she felt so blessed. Because out of all of the women on the earth that had ever lived, she had found favor in the eyes of our King. The Redeemer of Israel was going to come through the womb of this woman. Greatly favored. And see, you shall conceive in your womb and shall give birth to a son. And that's that Hebrew word ben. Remember, it's made of the bet and the nun. And it's a seed coming out of the house. Notice that he chose one of the women from the tribe of Judah, his house, in order to plant the seed in. Hallelujah. And shall call his name Yahshua, which means Yahweh's deliverance. Jesus does not mean that, you guys. In the Greek, in the Hebrew, it doesn't mean anything in Hebrew. Yahshua means Yahweh's deliverance. The deliverance that was promised in the Garden of Eden was now taking shape. And he said, you shall call this son Yahshua. Yahushua HaMashiach. All right. Verse 32. And he shall be great and he shall be called. See, he's going to take on a title. The seed that was promised was going to take on a title because we actually know where all seed comes from. It comes from Yahweh. And he shall be called the Son of the Highest, and Yahweh Elohim shall give him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Yaakov forever, and there shall be no end to his reign. He's an eternal king. And Miriam said to the messenger, how shall this be, since I do not know a man? And the messenger answering said to her, the set-apart Spirit, the Holy Spirit, shall come upon you, and the power of the Most High shall overshadow you. And for that reason, the set-apart one born to you shall be called the Son of Elohim. When a man and a woman come together, the man overshadows the woman. And when he overshadows the woman, he comes into the woman and he plants seed in the woman. There's the prophecy taking place and unfolding right before our eyes in the New Testament. Okay. So we see that the seed sown and that was foretold to be conceived actually happens here with Miriam, the maiden, Yahweh's handmaiden on top of that, from the tribe of Yehuda or Judah. So the promise that he would give seed to woman is fulfilled here in these scriptures. Now, let's go to these next set of verses, because we see the seed sown here. And then in Luke chapter 2, verses 22 through 24, we're going to see the conception producing the fruit of the womb. So if everybody would turn to Luke chapter 2. All right. Verses 22 through 24. This is when Yeshua had been born, and on the 8th day he had been circumcised. All right? Beginning of verse 22. And when the days of her cleansing according to the Torah of Moses. What? We started off reading the Torah portions, and Yahweh was giving the command after they came out of Egypt, for every woman who bore a child, male or female, she was to take a certain amount of days for her cleansing, and she was supposed to, if it was a male child, have him circumcised on the 8th day, and all of that had taken place up to this point. And when the days of her cleansing, 33 days after the birth of Yeshua, according to the Torah of Moshe, were completed, they brought him to Yerushalayim to present him to Yahweh. The seed, the fruit that had came from the seed, was brought to the house of Yahweh and presented to Yahweh. As it has been written in the Torah of Yahweh, every male who opens a womb shall be set apart to Yahweh, and to give an offering according to what is said in the Torah of Yahweh, a pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. So this shows us that they were not rich people. They couldn't afford to bring a male lamb that was a year old, but they could afford to bring the 2 young pigeons. Let's point something out here. She did bring a lamb. She did bring a lamb. And that lamb was Yeshua. In his youth, in his first year, he was brought before the priest, and he was shown to the priest. And that lamb was presented to Yahweh whole. And then some 33 years later, he was presented to Yahweh on the stake. The conception was received here, and the sacrifice of this male lamb was received just 30 to 33 short years later. The Torah paints a very beautiful picture of our Messiah. One more set of verses I would like to read with you before we stop. And once again, looking at all of these Hebrew letters and all these definitions and everything, it paints a beautiful picture of how this is not an Old and a New Testament. It's a reestablished covenant. It's the same story cover to cover. The seed planted or sown here was presented to the Father, and the sacrifice that would redeem the woman, the bride. Remember, this is showing us that she was a bride. Miriam was a bride, and she had been unclean. So when the days of her cleansing had been completed, she brought the sacrifice. A cleansed woman is bringing the sacrifice to present to the Father. There's the good news, and we started out in the Torah. So the seed that was sown and planted was presented to the Father here to redeem the woman, the bride, the people, the creation. And truly on this day when Yeshua was presented to the priest, the head of this world was bruised. And we just read that in the Torah. In the book of Genesis. He said, and he shall bruise his head, and he shall bruise his heel. The head of this world was bruised. The ruler of the authorities of this world was bruised this day. Hallelujah. And I want to read over some verses real quick before we close. in chapter 2 of Luke, verses 39 through 41, because we all want to grow in this. We need to understand how Yahshua grew here. Because if we have the same seed planted into us, and if we have been conceived in the womb of the bride, then we need to understand that we are expected to grow. Chapter 2 in the book of Luke, and at verse 39 through 41. And when they had accomplished all matters according to the Torah of Yahweh. You see that? They were still accomplishing the works in the Torah, even after the seed had been planted. Even after Yahshua had been planted in the earth and he rose again, that's a picture of that, showing us that there's still things to do. There's still the works of the Torah to be manifested in our life. They returned to Galilee, to their city Nazareth. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, being filled with wisdom, and the favor of Elohim was upon him. And his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the festival of the Passover. The family of Yahshua. These verses are showing us that the family of Yahshua, those who serve Yahweh in Yahshua, are still supposed to celebrate these feasts. They're still supposed to follow the Torah principles that are in this word. Hallelujah. So I pray that everybody has gleaned something out of this, and I pray that all of you have been following along. And I pray that everyone has been blessed by the study that we've done here today. And remember, you can always email me or call. Our email address and phone number is on the website. And this is what it's all about, folks. In our conception, this is what we're supposed to do. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit. Showing yourselves to be my disciples. That's the words of our Messiah. He wants us to bear fruit. And the only way that we can bear that fruit after we've been conceived in the womb of the woman, okay, is to continue to do the works that are written in the Word. Hallelujah. Let's go ahead and pray out. Father, we thank you so much for your Torah. We thank you for all of your commandments. We thank you most of all, Father, for the blood that was shed. And we thank you so much for the favor and grace that you have shown upon us, your people, that we can be conceived, that we can be given a chance at life once again, Father. We thank you for all of your marvelous works. Thank you for your Spirit. We thank you for your love. We pray this in the precious name of Yahshua. Hallelujah.
There's a time in your life of decision to test all your faith and what life you must live in, to test all your strength in the time